Hello there, whoever you are, wherever you are, whenever you are. It's me, Addison, your favourite friendly furbog, who sometimes hangs around the internet. I've been away. Things have been strange. I have a baby now. I've been trying to do things. It's been interesting. It's been good. I've really enjoyed it. And today, we have a returning guest and friend of mine, JV Hilliard. And we are going to be talking about his second published novel in the Warminster Saga, VORODIN'S LAIR. So, JV, how about you let the people know who you are, what you're doing, and yeah, just tell everybody a bit about yourself. Remind them.
Sure, and thanks again for having me back. I appreciated it the first time, and I'm excited to be back here the second time. Congrats on the baby. I know we've said that before, but for those that I haven't had a chance to say that to, congrats. Also, as you mentioned, yeah, my name's J.V. Hilliard. I am a epic fantasy author that mixes in some dark fantasy with epic fantasy. I am at book 2 of book 4 in the Warminster Saga. So VORODIN'S LAIR was released in September, and I've got book 3 coming out right after the holidays, and then book 4 will come out. It appears sometime in late spring, early summer of 2023, and that'll complete the 4-book series.
Wow, so you've got like an action-packed like book after book after book. It's not like
Gonna be nuts.
it's not like year 2. Here you go. You're not pulling a George R.R. Martin on us. That's pretty decent of you.
No,
I appreciate
this
that.
is a sprint. Yeah, it's a sprint compared to that. Yeah. So, but I'm looking. Look, I'm on a roll, and it's hard to stop. I mean, it's when you're telling a story, you don't want to stop in the middle of it and wait a year to write the next one. You want to make sure that you keep that momentum, and I can feel it when I'm at conventions. I can feel it when I'm doing interviews like this, and or I've gotten things from my readers. I've gotten fan art. I've gotten requests to write fan fiction. I've gotten people to come up to me and offer advice on how the story should go and what they like and what they don't like about it. So it's been great, and it just when you're a debut author and you're launching your first piece of work, you don't know where it's going to go, and this one has some real legs to it. You can just feel it. And when I'm out in the community, people are excited to come and meet me about it. It's not just me reaching out to them. It's people reaching out to me now, and it's been a lot of fun. So I'm not going to complain, but I definitely don't want to hit the brakes. So the momentum's there, so I'm plowing through.
Yeah, totally. And like I do want to speak to you about like Conlife and stuff, because like obviously you're going to different places, seeing different people, just being like an author on a book tour, which is crazy to think about when you think about how most people start as a hobby and then they get invited to places and get told that like people are coming to see you because they like your book. That must be insane. But first, I think we need to like lay out what is the Warminster Saga, and like what is the Warminster Saga, and you talk about momentum. What is the driving force of the story, I guess, so that we've got like a thing before we go into like my little nerdy bit about where we're going to talk about the first book and then talk about the second book. So yeah.
Yeah, no problem. So yeah, the Warminster Saga really focuses on a series of old Dungeons and Dragons adventures that I've had, and I've cobbled them together into one larger story, pitting some of our favorite heroes against one of our most notorious villains. And the story really starts out with Damus Alaric, who is a keeper of the forbidden. He's a prophet or a seer, and he's learning to use his powers at the Cathedral of the Watchful Eye. And the cathedral is home to all of these keepers who have this, tome, this relic, an artifact of sorts that's left from their god, which I call ancients in my novels. The ancients have left this tome there so that they can read it, and it allows them to interpret their prophecies. And
Mm-hmm.
so sometimes they look to the stars, other times they look into a mirror, and in Damus's case, he sees his visions come to him when he sleeps, like Edgar Casey, to use a 20th century reference. And in his dreams, he sees the return of a fallen keeper, a man named Grey Taurus the Mad, who is making his way closer and closer to the cathedral, reaching out for it. And so he's learning about his plot of revenge in book one. And book two, kind of launches, the adventure to stop him, right? So if you've ever played Dungeons and Dragons, or if you're a fan of epic fantasy, what I try to do is build around it the realm of Warminster, and you introduce multi point of view characters, so that as the plot advances, you see this relationship between Sir Ritter and Princess Adeline kind of growing and budding into their own love affair, as well as Damus and Grey Taurus. It's no longer just the two of them; it's now the world kind of coming together. Where you've got this sort of false prophet against the chosen one, kind of saga, and it's been a lot of fun. In book three, that'll continue, and then book four will be hopefully the epic end of everything. And as you mentioned, I got the ideas from years and years of playing tabletop role playing games, in particular Dungeons and Dragons, to name the primary one that I've used, and then taking those things and creating a world around it that's unique. And you can't borrow from Westeros, or you can't borrow from Middle Earth. You've got to create your own stuff, right?
Yeah.
So the realm of Warminster is very unique, in that respect. It's still set in sort of a medieval Western setting, but ultimately new races, new monsters, new money systems, new magic systems, everything I can do to create it and make it its own, while also providing classical fantasy background to it, including sometimes intervention by the gods, other times intervention by the advance of science, and in some cases it's the return of some bad guys and the return of some good guys even. So, and that's really what Warminster's about.
I did so I did a review of your book on Goodreads on the first one that you kindly sent me. I did appreciate that. Mm-hmm. You didn't have to do that, but it was great. It was awesome. And
I'm glad you liked it.
It was a very strong debut, and it did everything. Like, it set out the four pillars of any good novel: plot, themes, characters, setting. Like, those four foundations are really well put together, and I quite liked, like, I compared them to like actual characters in fiction, because it was the easiest way to help people analogize like what I thought the roles of these characters were. And so, like, you had, like you said, Damus is like your stereotypical reluctant chosen one. Like,
mm-hmm.
I don't like that he doesn't like the fact that he doesn't like the fact that he has these visions, and like they seem to be leading him in a certain way. Like, I think one of the funniest things I quite liked in the novel is I think it's towards the beginning, but he literally like shits himself because he has one of these visions, and like you describe that like in all its like unglorious glory, if that makes sense. Like, and I quite liked that, the fact that it was, even though he's like having these visions, and like he's obviously some sort of like magically inclined being, there's still like really uncool things that happen to him, like just like, oh man, I shat myself, damn. Because I will say, one of the only things that kind of confused me in the book for a while was I was very confused as to whether Damus could see, like, and I was like, but he says things that make you think that he can see, and then people like mention the fact that he looks blind, and then I think it got to a point like in the novel where it actually explains why that is. I'm like, oh, okay, right. I get it now. Because I quite, even though I was confused about it, and people might be like, that doesn't sound like good writing, I actually quite liked it, because it gave that like edge of like, well, is he like what's the deal there? Like, there's like I quite liked how you did that with Damus. Like, he has this unglorious things happen to him. There's like these doubts that you have about him, both in terms of his physical and his actual abilities. Like, he's a really interesting reluctant chosen one. And then you've got Adeline, who seems to be like your like not quite damsel in distress, princessy type person, who is obvious. I say obviously, but like has that stereotype of like she doesn't understand like normal people because she's been raised in a position of privilege, and it's going to help her to like understand that sort of thing. Is how I imagine it going. You can tell me I'm wrong as well. Like, and then I just like Ritter. Ritter was like my favorite thing in the whole book. Like I just like how like down to earth and like savvy he was about like the world in general, and like he's still quite young. Like he's still like I believe he's under 30, but he's just so jaded. Like he's just like, look, I know how this works, please just listen to me. And everybody around him's like, no, we're not going to listen to you. And he's like, fine, then die. Like he's and like he's often proven right. Like I loved those three characters, and I loved their perspectives, and I loved their dynamics when they did finally get together.
Yeah, well,
yeah,
go ahead.
I was going to say that, and then that's capped off beautifully. Like these three characters are capped off beautifully by their adversary. Like Grey Taurus is like weirdly like that fallen keeper, that dark reflection of the reluctant chosen one. Like this is where you could go if you decided to, etc., etc. And then he's just. But I felt sorry for him. I felt emotional about him. Like, no, he's not. And like sometimes you had to like remind yourself that no, this dude is the bad guy, and like this guy is the bad guy. He's not this sad, withered man that you know and that you describe throughout your book. He is like crazy, and he is going to end the world because reasons. Like it's really odd. Like these four characters, as well as a good supporting cast, are just really rich and good. So I don't know how you feel about that.
Well, yeah, I've enjoyed writing them, you know, and in many respects, you've hit on some really good points. I mean, Damus, in fact, was born blind, but he was brought sight, as you discovered later in the novel, by a wandering mage that disappeared after he gave him this blessing, and so he sees, but he still has the eyes of a blind person. So it looks, he's white eyes. It doesn't look like he sees. It's a stark interpretation of it. So when they see him, people think that he's blind just based on what he looks like, but he actually sees. And there's a bit of a double play there, right? Where you've got this blindness and seeing, and then he has visions when he sleeps, and there's that kind of like duality that I've built into it. And in the case of Adeline, you're right. I mean, she's been fun to write because, I don't want her to be a damsel in distress, but I want her to be in distress. And as somebody who will be the queen eventually of the Vermilion Nation, she's learning things in what she calls the Coventry, which is their word for outside of their realm, the realm of Eldwald, the home of the Vermilion Elves, where they rarely, if ever, travel, except in times of great need, and this is one of them. She's learning things about the outside world that's important for her to interpret and take back to the inside world. And you're right, she's been sheltered, in some ways privileged, in other ways it's a big disadvantage for her, and she has to learn on the fly in the absence of her father, who was killed in the first novel. And so she has to lean on a young Damus, or she has to lean on an inexperienced Ritter who may be a little bit more worldly than she and sees through different goggles, where she is high. She's as high of an elf as possible. Her race is supposedly born. They were the first elves, the elves that were left by their goddess Malexis. All the other elven cultures are subordinate. There's in it sort of this strange sort of caste system.
Yeah.
And Ritter's even worse because Ritter's half human and half elven, and he's looked down equally by both races in this sort of muggle kind of way. I call it trollborn.
Yeah.
In the book, and so Ritter's used to being the last one in and the first cast aside, and things. And so she sees Ritter for who he is, and he's really a growing hero, someone who is emerging to help the realm, and whose service will be there, even though she's been told time and time again that he's just Trollborn. You know, his value is lesser than hers, and she sees him emerging as something perhaps greater than her, in his importance to this. And then in the case of Grey Taurus, you know, look, I don't want, no one wants to create a novel that's just, hey, these are the good guys and these are the bad guys, right? So you want the good guys to have flaws. You also want the bad guys to have flaws. And, you know, usually you become a bad guy because you made a mistake, right?
Yeah.
It's not, you're not born a bad guy. Something happened to you, or a series of events happened. And in Grey Taurus's case, we learn a little bit more about them in book 2, and it reveals why he and Damus are kind of connected in this cosmic struggle that the ancients set them down this path to before Damus was even born.
Yeah.
And so there's some really cool stuff that's revealed at the end of book 2 that you'd be like, oh, I get it. I know why they hate each other now, and why this is important. While it also advances the plot among those 4 main characters, the 3 protagonists and the one really big bad evil guy.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people forget, like, and writers, consumers of media often forget that the hero's journey and the villain's journey are the same. Like, if you look at the Circle, like the traditional Greek myth, there's always an inciting incident where they had a normal life. And then something happened to them that made it change, and they found their way to like a mentor or something, or a thing that taught them, like, and it could be within themselves. And like, I feel like that's kind of what happened with Grey Taurus in the end, isn't it? Like, he looked upon, he did something that was completely taboo. He looked at his own future and then saw the things that were going to happen, and it kind of like fed into his loop of like, I don't know if this works anymore. And that's why I kind of liked him, because he was like, he seemed to have spotted a problem and actually be taking steps to like rectify it, which in most cases is admirable. But obviously in this case, because of the fact that it's going to possibly end the world, like, it's not. And then you've got like him with all his experience, all his like knowledge, versus just like the stereotypical like mid to late teenage trio. You're like, oh no, like, this isn't going to end well. So I've not read book 2 yet because of the fact that I want a physical copy, and it doesn't look like they're out in Europe yet. Like, it seems as though I'm gonna have to.
Oh, that's no problem. I'll send you one. That's okay. No problem. I'll get you one this week.
Oh, sweet. Thank you. I appreciate that. But one of the things that I am really interested in when you are looking at the sequel to this story that you've set up really nicely, and you've had those character moments. Well, I think you have anyway in the first book, which sees each person overcome like their main core struggle. So Damus's core struggle, in my opinion, was that he was a coward, really. I do not want to die, I do not want to fight. And then obviously at the end of book 1, he kills like that troll born pack like warlord. He like comes in, like, he has every opportunity to run, they purposely make it so that he can run, and he does not. He chooses to go back, and he's the one that kills the Trollborn warlord. I think Adeline's thing of not knowing the outside world seems to have rolled over nicely into her now, like being a bit more open and being a bit more thing in the absence of her father, finding ways to do things differently, in which promotes like her growth. And then Ritter is now a leader, like he is, like people look to him now that he's managed to, I don't know, like he's managed to earn that with like his bow. Is it called Whisper? Silencer, yeah. Silencer, his bow silencer. That's like, and he's like earned almost like a semi legendary mythological status himself, in the fact that now he has this bow, and like he's done great things himself, and now people are looking to him, even though he is a Trollborn. How do you keep up that momentum, that character growth momentum? Because at the end of book 1, you could assume that actually that's it. Now it's just going to be them solving the problem, but that's going to be a bit boring if it is just like them fighting. So how are you going to keep them growing?
Sure. So for Damus in book 2, he is coming of age, and coming of age, even though the seminal event was he decided to not turn and run, but he decided to fight with his friends, and it earned them victory and frankly survival there. And he's starting to understand, even though he's still reluctant to receive the messages from the prophecies from his ancient. He's learning to deal with them, and it's less scary to him, but more frustrating, right? And so it's how does he, and there are scenes in there that are like fraught with self-pity, and how he doesn't want it, and he fights himself against that, but then he realizes there's a certain event that happens where it's like, I have to do this now. It's me. And and of course, Ritter, the same thing. I mean, Ritter was born to be nothing more than a citizen soldier. He was a low noble of mixed blood, looked down upon, whose life was going to be guarding this dangerous frontier in the Dragon's Breath Mountains.
Yeah.
And now he's been cast out, set alone, away from the place where he's most comfortable, far away from home. And he's now protecting the princess alongside Damus. He's got this dual track where it's important for him to protect her against this assassin that's tracking her, and also keeping Damus alive, and sort of solving this riddle that's hanging over all their heads. And in Princess Adeline's case, she's learned a little bit more, and now it's she and Ritter have this budding love interest, right? And part of it is, they've been forced into this strange set of circumstances together, and they've found comfort in one another. But then there's a real fire there, and I've been trying to, slow play it a little bit so it's not insta love or anything like that. But it's enough that they've taken an interest in one another, and she's got to make some moral, social decisions as to whether or not she would forego the impact that's going to have for her when she returns to Eldwall, if this does move forward, or does she just stay the regal princess, and for the good of the order has to turn her back on someone who she has this growing love affair with. So I think that there's a lot of that. In the case of Grey Taurus, you as a reader, you hate him even more, but you start to learn why he is who he is, and I'm hoping it draws out a bit of sympathy, and I'm hoping people think, well, I get why he's doing some of this stuff, but it also leads into that next book 3 and the eventual book 4. So
I'm already sympathetic. How can you make me more sympathetic? It wasn't until he emerged. It wasn't until he emerged from the mirror that I actually went, oh no, he is the bad guy. Oh no, he is I'm oh, he's this broken man. He just wants his gift back. He wants to be able to do what he and restore himself, etc., etc. There's also that sad thing with his friend that he turned into a monster by accident. That he's he talks to him, and you kind of get that thing that he really misses him and wants him to come back, and you're oh man, and then he just comes out the mirror and you're oh shit, oh my god, what happened? So yeah, I don't know how you could make me sympathize more. I do like your thing about self-pity, because we kind of saw that towards the end of the novel with Damus, when he presents his powers to everybody else, when he he has that moment with the warlord, and then it kind of allows him to center himself so he can tap into his powers a bit more with Adeline's help and stuff like that. And then you kind of see that reluctance, I don't want to show them, I don't want to I don't want to convulse and fit in front of them all and stuff like that. He kind of has that. So I'm I'm quite happy that by the sounds of things you're going to explore that a bit more, like that again, reluctant chosen one thing of like, why is it me, etc., etc. In terms of love affair, I quite like it. I don't think it's like insta love. I think you're doing a good job of like playing that out, and like he is very much. I quite like the fact that like he's very much pursuing. Like I quite like the fact that in terms of the dynamic, Ritter seems a way more like headstrong and like I'm going for it, whereas Adlin's the one who's like batting him off a little bit with the help of that shield maiden lady who is amazing. Like who when she like you imagine her, like you imagine the camera panning to her and she's just there like chopping sausage or something, like she's great. I love her. But yeah, no, I don't know, like it seems to me like it would be very hard to make them grow, but by the sounds of things you've got a good like pathway for them, and like it sounds like it's going to work. From my head as a quasi like hobbyist writer, although we are trying to change that, I understand. So like let's talk about that momentum then that you mentioned before, and like before we started talking, and like now that you're so this is book 2, how does that change from book 1? Like what's the difference here now, because you've got VORODIN'S LAIR and you've got the Last Keeper. How is this book different, and the reception and the process of this book different than book 1?
So it is epic fantasy after all, right? And you've got to pull the characters and the plot line through several more novels, long novels. And so you have to have ups and downs. You have to have places where the characters fall down. You have to have places where the characters stand back up.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I think that, you know, book 2 angles for a lot of that stuff. You know, you get to see characters becoming who they're going to be. But in the same way, it's got to sort of be an Empire Strikes Back, right? It's got to be a bridge to the final episode. And in my case, I've got 2 final episodes. You know, it's almost like you're getting 2 empires stuck between New Hope and Return of the Jedi, right? So you've got, you know, you have an interesting enough plot that brings people through, and also continues to world build so that they can see what's going on around them and how each of these machinations connect with one another, while also providing them with enough action and with enough love of characters that you want to keep reading, right? So, you know, I think, you know, if you look at how Martin's done it over multiple books, because you mentioned Game of Thrones before, or you look at what Tolkien has done with prequels and you know the stuff that's outside the novels that you can read and learn about as part of it, you know, that's all helped to continue to build that world, and it allows you to take a small book like The Hobbit and then reflect on how that impacts, you know, 3 very large, you know, classic fantasies and the Lord of the Rings trilogy, or what Martin's done over a 5-book series. And I'm angling in that direction of the 4 books, and I'm hoping that this one solidifies the characters in your head, also while pitting them against danger, seeing you overcome them overcome them alongside some failures. They don't always win.
No.
Right? And I think that's important too. And I think that's, you know, I you know, when I use the term momentum before, it's because people have come up to me and they're trying to guess what the next thing is going to be. And that's fun, you know, because I know what it is. You know, book 3 is already written, book 4's, you know, on its way. So like I already know what's happening, and you've got people begging me not to kill certain characters, or, you know, waiting for certain things to happen. And, you know, but you can't tell them. You just know where it's going. You don't want to be the spoiler, but you know where it's going. And, you know, so, but you hear that stuff and it gets you excited, you know, as an author. People are invested in it. And you know that they're going to buy the next one and the next one and the next one, hopefully. And they want it, you know, as a fan of epic fantasy myself, you want it to come to that monstrous conclusion, you know, at the end. And I think people are going to really enjoy where this heads, you know, in books 3 and 4. But I think for book 2 in VORODIN'S LAIR, a big chunk of the mystery behind all the characters, kind of Lincoln logs itself together, and you now know where everybody's going, and you see the path before them all, and then it's just, well, how do they win, or
Yeah.
are they going to lose, right? So I think that's what I've tried to do with book 2.
I like that. I like that idea. One, Empire Strikes Back's the best Star Wars film. Word.
Yes, it is.
So
Yeah.
the fact that there's 2 of them, that's pretty dope.
I hope you think so.
I think that's a really good, cool thing. Like, and I kind of want to press you on this idea of like, fans asking you stuff and everything, because that must be pretty dope. Like, that must be really cool to have people come up to you at these cons, in these like book signings. Like, even if it's like, I'm not saying that you've not got a lot of fans, because I can see I'm in your like Discord thing, Discord server, and like there is a lot of people talking in there, like, and stuff like that, and I'm just kind of there like, even if 10 people came up to me, I'd be pretty jazzed that they were like so invested. How does that feel, that like people are genuinely like invested, they want to know, they need to know, etc, etc?
Yeah, so in a word, it's humbling. When I set out to write this, it was a bucket list thing. It was something I had in my heart that I wanted to get out on paper and just needed to do it. It was one of the things I've always wanted to do. And then when you feel that others like it well enough to spend money to come and see you, and then buy a book and have you autograph it, and want to stand there and talk to you about it for a while, because they want to know what's going to happen next, or why did this character do something. That's the humbling bit, or I've gotten people to send me, fan art where they're drawing pictures of Ritter, or they're drawing pictures of a battle scene that they had, or and it's ironic where in your head, meaning me, you have a picture of what the character looks like, and you see someone sense, and it's like glaringly close, and you're like, wow, like if I explained it well enough that this is what they came back with, then and I try to do the best I can to put that stuff out into social media, and thank them for doing that, or people that come up and tell you about the characters that they like and the characters that they don't like, and even though they don't like them, you can tell passion. They have a passion for them, which makes you feel good. It makes you feel like you've impacted somebody, and that's ultimately what, if I had a goal with this, it was really to entertain people. I found entertainment in creating it, and then before that, playing it in a role-playing game, and now I get to see how other people will react, or when they come up and tell you, this is what I would have done.
Yeah.
You're like, all right, well, then you've got them, because they literally got in their car that morning, drove somewhere, and paid to tell me that story. And it makes you feel like, you know what, I'm glad that this is, this is really impacting someone in a positive way, and they're having a good time reading it, which is what this is all about too, right? Like I want to make sure that my readers enjoy it. But since the last time we've spoken too, part of that Discord channel that you referenced before really is the growth of, I'm licensing the intellectual property from the realm of Warminster to a video game company. And we're going to see an augmented reality, virtual reality game launch in 2024. So even though that sounds like it's a long way away, it's not really.
No.
And I've gotten the opportunity to help them sort of storyboard it. And what you're seeing in Discord is folks that are following the realm of Warminster there and playing along. They're able to. We've offered early adopters the ability to earn stuff for their eventual avatars when the game comes out. They'll be ahead of people that buy it and download it on day one. They'll have skills that they've developed. They will have perhaps even some of them might earn some level of nobility. They're going to earn or buy property within the game that they can develop. It's going to be a lot of fun. And I think that's the kind of stuff that really gets me ginned up, because those are not my typical readers. So when you're on Discord, you're playing games, right? People go there for games, and now I'm able to reach out to a group of readers that might have picked up my stuff, but more or less would rather play a video game. And knowing that my novels were strong enough that a company is investing in creating a video game out of it, and I think that's that is super exciting for me.
That is really dope, especially considering like, obviously you've probably given them like the lowdown of like all 4 novels because to help with the development, but considering debut novel, you've got your sophomore one coming up, you just come out, and they're already thinking of like making it into some sort of video game, like virtual reality, augmented reality, whatever. Like that's pretty heavy. That obviously speaks to the quality of your work if they're willing to invest that money and that time into developing that. Because now if we
I always hear, when's it going to become a miniseries, or when's it going to become a novel, or a movie, or something like that. And then out of the blue, the opportunity to make it a video game popped up. And because I always thought it would adapt well into a graphic novel.
Mm-hmm.
I always thought, as a fan of comic books myself, and as an adult, the graphic novel stuff, I've always thought that this would be a really good fit, because I try to write rich. I try to write graphically, so people will see, and I'm trying to paint a picture with that, which I think lends itself to that medium. And this one kind of came out of the blue, and I was glad to take the opportunity and work it out. So I'm looking forward. Fingers crossed it works out well, but we'll see. We're a year and change away, so we're almost there.
Yeah, like I would definitely say that there's room for it to be in a visual medium based on your writing style. You are very like graphic in terms of your, not as in graphic as in like shocking or anything like that. You're not pulling any red weddings or anything like that, but you're like, I can see what you want me to see. Like, I imagine what you want me to imagine, whether it's the weather, whether it's the place that they are. I think the best version of that I can think of from The Last Keeper is the old fortress that they hold up in. You described that so well, and I was like, and at times you forget that, like, because you've described it so well, and like you've even like included like the lore of it and like why it is and stuff like that, you kind of forget that it's like dilapidated until you then like bring it back up and you're like, oh, like it's not as strong as it once was. And like, so you get like this grand image. You almost create like 2 images. You create like the grand image of what this once was, this like bastion that held out in this great battle that is like legendary and everybody remembers, and rah rah rah. And then the current reality of the situation where they're like basically like barricading it with whatever they can find. Like it's like, oh shit, like this is like, and you did that masterfully. So yeah, I can definitely see
it was my
being graphic.
favorite part of that novel. I loved writing that scene. It reminded me of Thermopylae, or it reminded me of the Alamo, like somebody's last stand. And it's like we're stuck. We can't outrun them. We're beat. We're fatigued. This is our last chance, and we know it's the chances of success are minimal. But if we're going to make it work, we got to make this work. And when they break into it, with all the lore that Arjun tells them about beforehand, and they're like, wow, this place is a piece of shit.
Yeah.
It's like, what are we going to do? How, and of course he was there with 60 men. He wasn't there with the 7 or 8 that were there with him. And so now he even has to fight in more compressed quarters, but he's able to use the catapults that are there, and the trebuchets that are there, and the ballistae that are there, to fend them off and at least give them a fighting chance and deplete their numbers before they get to the hill. And they do have the high ground. They have, not only do they have high ground, but they've got this remnant castle that they've got to break into. And that no matter where you are is going to be hard to do. And with the minimal force that they brought, they were able to do it long enough for what they thought was Damus to escape. And it turns out that
he came back.
It was more than that, right? Yeah. So it was all, and from a battle scene, it was just so much fun to write, because I took the position of writing it until the very last bit through the eyes of the enemy. I thought that was important for, because if I was writing it through the eyes of Damus, or writing it through the eyes of Fox Dalton or Arjun, it would be different. Like, you don't have this, but I wanted people to feel the frustration and the sacrifice, and how Mizeo wanted to get Damus. Like, he needed to get Damus, and it was at the cost of most of his forces.
Yeah.
And how they died was like crazy. Like, he thought, I've got them. They're on these plains. They have nowhere to hide. And all of a sudden, pow. And it's
Yeah.
like, how are they fighting back? And of course, mercenaries they're not going to be as bought in as some of these others that are fighting for a cause like Ritter. So at the first time they hit the resistance, they're like, wait a minute, we just got smacked in the face, and he has to rally his own troops. And I thought that was a different way of presenting it, and I wanted to write it that way for those reasons.
I quite liked, so there's two things I really liked about that battle scene. One, I quite like the preparation kind of made it more... I like the idea, and this might just be in my head, but I kind of feel like the preparation that Argent got them all to go through was kind of like how you prepare for a heist movie. Like the bit in a heist movie where you have like the
Right.
thing where they talk about everybody's roles and stuff like that, and like what they're going to do to prepare for the heist. I kind of felt like that, because like you had like people working on the trebuchets, people like going around and plugging in holes, you got people finding stuff to barricade things, and you've just got Damus there like watching them all. And then, like you said, I really liked the enemy perspective of the battle, where like this guy who's never really lost, like he's never really lost, he's drawn, he's going to call it a draw every now and then, but he's never really lost. And then yeah, he's just there like, I do not understand how there's like 8 people in there, 7 people in there, and I'm losing with an army of what, hundreds? Like, how?
Yeah.
And like he's got to rally them, and then like there's that cool duel-esque moment where him and Argent like go at it, like and that's really cool. And yeah, that fight was just so good. That scene and how it's described and everything. So moving away from that though, because I could genuinely go on about that forever, like that section of the book. In terms of like your thing with fans and stuff like that, like I think there's 2 aspects of it. It's kind of a double-edged sword. One is like there's really cool things that they do, like the fan art, like all the cool things that you've said, and then I don't know if I could take suggestion as I'm going around the country. Like obviously I'm very different here. We British are a bit like more like oddly polite, but not at the same time. So how do you balance that out when people are like going and like guessing and like making all these suggestions? That's the word.
Well, first of all, you have to have a thick skin. You can't take it personally. And the story is the story, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if they were writing it, they would have written it, right?
Yeah.
and they didn't. So, but getting people's opinions are important because it informs the next book, right? It informs the next series. It informs the next group of characters. You listen to what people like, and you try to write toward that as long as it has a purpose, it has a meaning. Like, I'm not gonna, like, I had one person tell me, please don't kill this character. Right, and I'm like, well, if it makes it for a better novel, I'm gonna do that, right? Or I'm gonna make it for part of the story, right?
People have to die. Like, people have to die. It's a thing.
In an epic fantasy, that's what happens, right? There's sacrifice and duty and all those kind of things, a struggle that you have to overcome, and not everybody survives that. And in this case, they were asking it about a bad guy. They really liked a certain bad guy, and they were like, don't. I could see it coming. Don't do it. And I'm like, well, I'm already on to book 4, so you'll find out. Just keep reading. I keep telling them, right? But I don't mind the constructive criticism. Everybody has an opinion. It's just like me. I saw the end of Game of Thrones, and like many, I was not happy with the way it ended. But by the same token, I realized it wasn't my decision to end it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was theirs. They were the ones that were writing the story, and so I'm getting a little taste of my own medicine. And you become, like I said, it's humbling that people care enough, and so you have to look at it in the vein that they want to come and tell you what they want to see, and I think that'll help me as a writer down the road when I'm designing new stories or follow-ups or origin stories. Incorporating some of those ideas, I think, will be helpful, because I know that that's a popular thing and people want to see that. So if I want to sell more books, great, but it's not always the it's not always the way I'm not going to capitulate to what they want to do.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So one of the things that I want to get into as well with you, because of the fact that I'm really interested in it, because obviously you know I want to write. Like I need to find the time. There's not enough hours in the day, but I'm gonna find it somehow, some way. Is your roadmap then? Because like, sure, you've got a 4-book series here that you've made, sculpted, got all the way to the end of now. How does one roadmap that in advanced enough where you don't, because you couldn't have just like wrote it, there had to be some sort of plan. How did that happen? Where's that what's that roadmap? What does it look like? How did it come to be, etc., etc.? And how did you flesh it out? Because I struggle with that bit. I'm not gonna lie, I struggle with that, like, planning.
Sure. So in the business of writing, there are two types of writers typically. There are plotters, which I am, and then there are pantsers, people that write by the seat of their pants, and they could just sit down and start writing. And I don't know where those terms came from, but they're true apparently. And I fit the one mold to a T. I am a quintessential plotter, and as that kind of planner, I think part of it comes from the fact that I've already play tested this. I mean, my cheat code is I know what happens because I played it in a Dungeons and Dragons campaign or several Dungeons and Dragons campaigns. So I already know the direction it'll go, and it was play tested, right? I had people that played it that went in different directions than I thought they were going to go as a dungeon master, and you've got to kind of make up for that. But in this case, I can go back and make it flow however I want because it's my books. No one's playing the books. It's actually, I can change things that happen in real life. And some of my friends whose characters are reflected in the books have even said that to me. They said, that really isn't what my character would have done. And I said, I know, but this isn't your character anymore. This is a character in a novel, and this makes for a better
I need them to do
maybe.
this.
Yeah, right. So for me, like I use that, and then what I do is I plot everything, right? So I knew when I sat down to write it, I broke it into what I thought was going to be 3 novels, which ended up being 4, and where the right start and stops are for each novel, what each character needs to do, and you go deeper. You almost have to put yourself in the heads of those characters because they would react differently to certain things, and they make decisions that are different than you would make, and maybe even counterintuitive to what you would do. But it's important for them to do that because that's what they would have done in the novels. And so I think that my years of role playing, it's helped me jump in and out of the heads of characters, while also my years of role playing have allowed me to be a good dungeon master. And I think dungeon masters have to be good storytellers. And I'm just taking that verbal storytelling that goes on when I play, and now putting it into literature, and writing something in a way that I would tell. And now instead of having to do it live on stage when you're playing the game, now I can actually sit down in my lab and pound away at the keyboard and think about every single thing they're going to do and what they're going to say and what they're going to wear, and details that won't escape. And I think that attribute has helped me become a stronger author, especially in an epic fantasy kind of a genre where you need to really, really world build. People expect it, your readership expects it. And so I hope to be able to present that to them based on my experience as a dungeon master.
Nice. I get that. I get that a lot because, like, yeah, just having that, needing that when you DM. I quite liked something you said earlier, and because you've kind of mentioned that, like, world building aspect again, like, you said it about the Lord of the Rings books and the fact that you could read out more and stuff like that, and build on stuff that you've already read through like the actual novels or like the other material. And George R. R. Martin does similar things with like Fire and Blood, etc., etc. Is it Fire and Blood?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here's my example of something that I always found strange about Lord of the Rings, but it was a really good bit of world building. And I was gonna ask you if you've had anything like this that you've like had to like wrestle with. So one of the things that I always found weird about Lord of the Rings is that Aragorn knew Theoden as a boy. Like, it's mentioned that Aragorn knew Theoden as a boy, and then now Theoden, if you've not read Lord of the Rings, he's the King of Rohan, leader of the Rohirrim, etc., etc. And he met Aragorn when he was a boy, and Aragorn looked the way he did. So then when you read Theoden's like almost like refusal to accept Aragorn's advice, you kind of have this really weird feeling once you like go back to it and you read again, like this weird dynamic that isn't actually like, because in the films, one of the things I think they miss out of this is it kind of sounds like peer on peer, like I don't listen to you because you're my equal. But when you realise that actually Aragorn's a lot older than Theoden, and Theoden has known Aragorn for a long time, it's almost like, even though he's older now and he's like an old man, it's almost like a kid kicking it out against his elders. Like, it's almost like I'm ignoring you because you don't know, old man. like you don't understand what it's like now, Zoomer. Like, have you had any like funny interactions where that's been something like that's been developed, where you look at it, almost makes you look at things a different way or in a different setup because of the world building you've done? Or has there been anything that you've like, actually that's not how I wanted it to go, and so you've had to world build something to like add context?
Yeah, so that happens a lot, right? So you start out and you're building, as an author, you're building in a vacuum, right? You're building something out and only you see it. And what you try to do is catch those things in a round of beta reading, which is you reaching out to, for those who don't know what beta reading is, it's basically a soft opening. You've put together the novel, it's gone through a round or two of edits, and you think that it's acceptable, but you want to see what people think about it. And if you get strong opinions one way or the other about certain aspects of the novel, you're hoping that they catch something in there that you'll be able to change before it goes to final publication, right? So, being able to share that with a group of strong beta readers, some of which are people that I play D&D with, and that lived, the story that I'm, adopting, helped. But then others, you want to give it to people that never read it before. What I've found is if you give it to your mom's going to say, it's the best thing I've ever read, right? And you don't need that. You need someone to come in and say, why did this happen? Or I don't understand why or that just came out of the blue. And those are comments you can use as a writer. If you're willing to listen and accept constructive criticism, you can go back and change. I just had a review a couple of days ago on book 2, and they were like, I love all this great world building, and then all of a sudden in book 2 there's a bunch of Vikings. And I thought that was, she thought that was jarring. Well, I introduced the concept of the Vikings in book 1, and there is a lot of world building, and there is some unique qualities to the realm of Warminster you're not going to find in other realm settings. And I mentioned a few before, but if I took that to heart, I would say, oh, I can't believe she doesn't like that or whatever. But maybe there is something in there. Maybe I should have introduced it a little bit better. And it's something that I didn't catch, in the first one. But you want to make sure that that's something that you remember for the next book and the next book and the next book. And I had thought I had introduced it fine. Or like what you said earlier about, I wasn't sure if Damus was blind or not. You liked it, but I've gotten people to ask me, even if they've completed book 1, is he blind? Is he really blind? And I'm like, no, and some of that is just, that happens regardless of how you write. People see things in their head, which is always happens to me, and I'm sure it happens to you too. When you go see a movie that's been adapted from a novel, and now you see it on the big screen, you're seeing it through someone else's eyes. And you're like, oh, that's not what the book did. And it upsets you because you already had a movie playing in your head. It was your own movie. You created it in your own head. And so you saw something in a different way. And so here, this is the opportunity to kind of catch them and describe every detail that you need to kind of move the novels along at the pace that you want, with the kind of resonance that you want with certain characters or lack thereof with others. And, people read things differently, and they comprehend things differently, and therefore interpret them in a way that you'll never be able to escape all of that. But that woman also gave me a 4 out of 5 on an Amazon review. So, she obviously liked the book, but she did her job, which was, hey, these are some things I didn't like about it. Here are some things that I did. Overall was a 4 or 5, and she says at the end, I would recommend this series, and that's all you want out of it. You're not going to get 5 stars all the time, but I'll take a 4 out of 5 any day.
Yeah, definitely. I usually give my stuff to my wife because she's very honest with me, and because of the fact that she isn't a massive fantasy reader. Well, she didn't used to be. She does like fantasy stuff now because we played D&D for a bit and stuff. She is always very honest, and she's always very honest with what she thinks and how she feels about the stuff I do. And because I think she understands who I am as a person, like she can see where things are coming from as well. So like she can see why I might write about that certain thing in that certain way, because she knows me. And I think that's a really good thing that you've got going on with beta reading. In terms of that, actually, talking about the process, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, apart from the novel itself, so if we wrap up, maybe if we wrap up with this part with the elevator pitch or something of VORODIN'S LAIR or something, because I haven't wanted to touch on it because I didn't want to spoil it for one, myself, or two, the people listening or watching or whatever, but I did want to talk about it. The next thing I wanted to talk about is your mentorship and how you seem to be in the scene now as kind of a mentor slash middle person who people go to for advice and stuff. So let's finish off about talking about VORODIN'S LAIR by giving us the elevator pitch. What is VORODIN'S LAIR? How does it build on what you've already done?
Yeah, so VORODIN'S LAIR is book 2, and it picks up right at the end of The Last Keeper, and it flings these party of adventurers, those that are out there trying to stop Great Taurus the Mad, together. Finally, they've been able to come together, and now they've got a mission, and they travel to the city of Abacus to meet with Vorodin the Ageless, and he is sort of my Gandalf, right? He's this 5,000-year-old elven figure that they need to convince to help them so that they could solve the riddle that Great Taurus has presented to them, and that Damus can learn to harness his powers in his struggle against Great Taurus. And so that's really the elevator pitch for book 2. Now, there's a lot of fun stuff that goes on in there too. You've got this little romance with Ritter and Adeline building, and even some romance between Damus and Katya, who was his healer in book 1. But you see that the plots advance, and with this sort of axis of evil, where you've got von Lormark marching on Thronehelm, and you've got the Morbog appearing at the very beginning of the novel, and you're like, how are these guys? They're the ones that took the Tetrine in the beginning, and we thought that was Great Taurus. And it's like a little bit of a spin you get right out of the prologue, and then you finally get that first ramhead conversation or confrontation between Damus and Great Taurus in this novel too. So I think people will like that. It's action packed. It's a lot of fun. It advances the overall plots of everything, and I think that from what I've seen so far, the response has been, and these are reviews of people that I don't know, but the response has been pretty strong. So I'm happy with that. And then to your second question about what it's like to be a more known commodity. I am not a famous author by any stretch of the imagination. I am a budding author. I'm trying to build into a career around this. But, folks that have never done this before approach you in two different veins. There are those that want to be independent authors. They like the idea of being independent, and they want to launch their own stuff, and then therefore have to control their own destiny as it moves forward. And they ask me what it takes, and what are some of those best practices that I have in my life that they could also employ to help them get there. And I tell people a lot. I say, look, what you need to do is, writing needs to be muscle memory for you. It has to be like the day that you don't do it, it's like the day you feel like you didn't go to the gym and you feel fat because you didn't go. You felt lazy because you didn't go. And that's the same thing with writing. If you let it go too long, then it's okay to let it go even longer. You have to at least try to write something, even if it's just an outline of a chapter, a couple of notes here or there, a reread of a chapter that'll say, all right, well, this is where I want to go with this, and you can make some decisions. I think that's important. And the second thing I tell them is to be open to constructive criticism. You're not the best at your field, especially me, as a debut author. The Last Keeper, even though I think people really enjoyed it, it won't be my best work. My best work is in front of me, and I'm going to grow into it.
Yeah.
At least that's my hope. And
Yeah.
I tell them that too. And
that makes sense.
That as you understand where those things are going. And then the other subset of that are folks that want to be traditionally published. And I am traditionally published through Dragon Moon Press. It's a small press. It's not one of the big five. But I tell people, don't get discouraged when you send out your query letters and they don't get answered, or you get standard stock answers saying no, thank you. Or if you're looking for an agent to represent your interests, those things happen, and your books are not for everybody. Like when I found from my first round, I wanted to sell it to all of my friends and family, and some of them bought it out of pity. They wanted to, oh, I'm going to help, I'm going to help Joe along, and I'm going to do this. But you learn almost as quickly as how much of that is mistake is. It's because they're not your typical readers. If they were your typical readers, they would have bought it without you asking.
Yeah.
And so you have to go where your typical readers are, and that is hit libraries, hit bookstores, hit conventions, find people on social media. Social media is free except for the time that you put into it. And those are ways that I've been able to sell books for me and my publisher, or ways that those that are indies could sell for themselves, just by reaching out to folks that way. And you can't be shy. Your book is your brand, and you are your business, and you have to treat it that way in order to be successful, and at least that's the path I've taken.
Yeah, I think.
I hope that answers your two questions.
No, it does. It does. I think how I described you is you're now like I quite like the idea of a known entity, but I also think you're trusted by the looks of things, because like a lot of people seem to trust you. Like I've spoke to some of your other colleagues and stuff like that, and like they trust your words. They believe what you say, and like I in the mentorship role kind of that you've played towards me, even though I've been like kicking and screaming like I don't know if I can do it, Joe. Like people trust you, and I think that's a good. You're not like a big famous author, but you're a trusted author in what you do. And like, so that mentorship role that you seem to be taking on, that like middleman role you seem to be taking on by like getting people in contact with the right people and stuff, I think is really important, because it is daunting, like to try and get started in this industry. In general, like publishing is scary. Like it's something that I wanted to do for a long time, but even to be a publisher and work at one of these presses usually takes like years of going and getting coffee for free, and like I can't do that. I got bills to pay, like so yeah, like I really appreciate like the effort you've put in to be that figure for a lot of people at the moment. I appreciate like the hard work you put in terms of like getting out there, and like I don't know, like it's just really admirable what you do in terms of both your mentorship and your own work. Like you don't have to do those things for people.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's just really cool, and like I think it's a really cool story. I can't wait for my copy. I can't wait to read it. Because yeah, I'm just absolutely. I really like these books. Like not just because, and I will admit, like I admit in all my reviews and stuff, like you are my friend. I really like hanging out with you and talking to you when we do get the time. But like they are good. Like I would be a shitty friend if I turned around and said that they were good when they weren't. Like especially as someone who is also a writer who loves fantasy, etc., who loves comic books. Like I would be a terrible person if I told you and just said, yeah, these are great, when they're not. Like because you want the best for these people, and I think what you do and what you have done and the way you're going is great, and I can't wait for the rest of it. I can't wait to see you at more conventions and stuff like that, and because I really like the photos you like put up and everything when you go. Like I like.
I try.
I like
it's content, right?
Yeah, I like it, and I just hopefully I can take some of that on and learn it, and like that work ethic. and stuff like that. Because you're right, like I've been in preparation for this to like remind myself. I've been like pounding away at the keyboard for like a couple of hours today, and I think you were exactly right in that muscle memory comment. Like I felt like lethargy. Like I like that word today. I felt like as I got more and more into it, like almost like lactic acid build up. Like I've got to stop now, and I'm like, no, I've got to keep going. I've got to push through, sort of thing. So yeah, like I think you're right in that. You're 100% right, and that I think if anything from this podcast, if you want to be a writer, you need to take that advice from Joe. Like it is like the gym, you've got to go. Like even if it's for an hour when you usually do an hour and a half, or if it's for half an hour when you usually do an hour, you've got to go, because otherwise you end up like me, where I'm a bit like, I really want to do this, and then I go to do it and I'm just tired by like 3 paragraphs in, like I'm genuinely exhausted. So again, Joe, I just want to say thank you. I think that's a good place to wrap up. Would you like to tell the people where they can find you, where they can speak to you, etc., etc.?
Yeah, sure. It's really easy to get a hold of me. You can find me at jvhilliard.com, or if you want to go to any of my social media channels, you can find me at JV Hilliard Books, or on Facebook and Discord, I'm just JV Hilliard. Mm-hmm. Everywhere else is, throw the books on the back to find me. But I'm pretty simple to find, and my books are available pretty ubiquitously. You can find them on Amazon. You can go to my publisher at Dragon Moon Press, or any other distribution channels. If you like Audible books, audiobooks, you can go to Audible. You can go to Apple Books. You can find them in different places like that. And then in some locations, you can find them at stores like Barnes and Noble, etc.
Mm-hmm. And I'm Addison. I am your favourite friendly furbog who has been not hanging about the internet, but kind of has been. I am hoping to get back into this. I'm hoping to get back into writing. But I hope that whoever you are, wherever you are, whenever you are, I hope you're safe. I hope you're well. I hope you're doing what you love. And I hope that I'll see you again soon. I'll see you in a bit. Bye.